After adding configurations to your assembly, it's likely you'll continue making changes. You might add components, add features, suppress mates, and there are many changes you can make. This brings up an interesting question. If you make changes in one configuration, what happens to these changes in the other configurations? Well, in this lesson, we'll take a look at a group of options that allow you to control exactly how changes made in one configuration affect other configurations. Here, I have an assembly with two configurations. If I toggle between the two, you can see the only difference is the round cover plate. In the large diameter configuration of the assembly, the 1-inch diameter configuration of the cover plate is used. In the small diameter configuration, the 1/2-inch configuration of the cover plate is used. With both configurations already in place, I'll be adding a component to this assembly while the small diameter configuration is active. The component I'll be adding is the offset shaft. I'll add a couple of mates to position it. Now I'll switch over to the large diameter configuration. Notice the offset shaft component has also been added in this configuration. Why? Well, let's take a look at the properties of the large diameter configuration. To access properties, simply right-click the configuration name and select Properties. Now take a look at the Advanced Options section. These options control how this configuration will behave when it's not the active configuration. Now, this can be a bit confusing, so let's make sure we're on the same page. The first option reads, Suppress new features and mates. Since the option is checked, what this means is suppress any new features and mates added to the assembly while this configuration is not active. Likewise, the next two options, which read Hide new components and Suppress new components, specify how newly added components should be handled in this configuration if they're added to the assembly while this configuration is not active. Notice neither of these options is checked. So if components are added while this configuration is inactive, I would not expect them to be hidden or suppressed. Now you saw a minute ago that I added the offset shaft component to this assembly. When I added it, this configuration was not active. This is why, despite the fact that I was not working on this configuration, the offset shaft still showed up here. Still confused? Let's go through another example. This time, I'll check the Hide New Components option and click OK. Next, I'll switch over to the small diameter configuration. Now, I'll add another component to this assembly, the cover plate. I'll position it using a few mates. Now, when I switch over to the large diameter configuration, do you think we'll see the cover plate? Let's try it. Remember, in the properties of this configuration, I checked the option to hide new components. That's why when the cover plate was added to the other configuration, it was automatically hidden in this configuration. Now, just to make sure this is perfectly clear, let me make one more change. In this configuration, I'll add an assembly cut. I'll sketch on this end face and create a cut that goes through the entire assembly. When I switch to the other configuration, the cut doesn't appear. Why? Well, if I look at the properties of the small diameter configuration, the option to suppress new features and mates is checked. This is why the new assembly cut feature was automatically suppressed in this configuration. One more important detail you should be aware of regarding these advanced options is that they only apply to future changes. What I mean is, if I now uncheck the Suppress New Features and Mates option, it has absolutely no effect on the assembly cut that was created previously. If I look at the Feature Manager tree, you can see the assembly cut is listed, but it's still suppressed. Because the advanced options only apply to future changes, you can enable or disable them at any time without affecting the appearance of your configurations. If you'll be working with many assembly configurations, you can save yourself quite a bit of time if you have a good understanding of advanced configuration options. For instance, let's say you're working on an assembly with a total of 10 configurations. You decide a new component needs to be added to 7 of the 10 configurations. You can go to the configuration properties of the 3 other configurations and enable the Suppress New Components option. Now, when you add that new component, you know for certain that it only appears in the 7 configurations you expect.